what is a software craftsmanship? And let's say that is a specialized question, how to explain what is a software craftsmanship to business people or non-technical people in general. Because let's say a practical case that could be a final client or a manager that is not necessarily a technical person. So to explain it in the best way.
Okay, so I can have a very short answer or a very long answer. So the short answer is, for me, software craftsmanship is a mindset, is about how we as individuals, as software professionals, understand our profession and how we see us, the relationship that we have with our profession. So that for me would be a very simple answer. A much longer answer, which I might expand if you want, is
Yes, please. Yes.
why software craftsmanship became a thing, where it came from, what is the problem it's trying to resolve. So what is the difference of the mindset that I talk about in software craftsmanship? Because for me, craftsmanship is a mindset. And what is the difference between the practices, the methodology? So the ideology versus methodology, the way you think about what you do. So that's a much longer discussion, which I'm more than happy to talk about as well.
Yes, yeah, it's more in the sense that if, for example, if you say to some technical people about agile, okay, yes, they immediately say, okay, yes, agile. But it's to how to explain the value that can bring to the company to introduce the software craftsmanship mindset. So how could be the best way to introduce it for you?
Yeah, so this is why I think it's worth maybe me spending a few minutes just telling you a little bit about the history, because this gives you also ammunition to speak to people and to companies if you understand the full context, right? So we all know, like in 2001, there was the whole agile movement, and people like myself that started before that, we got very excited about agile, because for us, agile, how it was conceived, how it was designed by the 17 guys that created it, was for us amazing, because we were coming from a more waterfall or some unified process, like in some places. And for us, I said, wow, you know what? Developers now will have a more important role to play. We will be more connected to the business. We will have bigger contributions. We will have a seat on the table, right? So that was really, really exciting for us. But unfortunately, and now I'm trying to really summarize like 20 years of history, but like, but we were disappointed, because in the first years of Agile, in the very early 2000s, Agile, there was a split. Those 17 people that went to the ski resort in Utah, the way that they behaved afterwards was different, and that created a split. And that split was, there were some people focusing more on the process side and methodologies like Scrum and mostly Scrum, like the SDM and Crystal were not so popular. Because Agile is an umbrella, by the way. Agile is an umbrella of multiple methodologies. You have Crystal, you have FDM, you have Scrum, you have extreme programming, and we have some practices the pragmatic programmers guys had. So it's an umbrella of methodologies, right? So, but we all know what happened. Scrum became very, very popular. And this was a good and a bad thing. The good thing is that it spread the word about Agile, and we cannot throw the process side of Agile is really good compared to where we were before. We now work in a more collaborative manner. We work in shorter iterations. So we try to deliver something to production more often. So all of those things are very, very good. But there was a lot of focus on that, and that was easier to sell to managers and to companies, because this is about process, it's about productivity, it's about collaboration. what was very difficult to sell was the technical practices. It's like what extreme programming was bringing, that it was the most technical discipline among all the agile disciplines. So this creates the fraction or a friction and a fraction in the agile community. And the people that were more associated to the technical disciplines, like myself, but like Uncle Bob, for example, we were a bit disappointed. And we started criticizing that. So like, okay, it's good, the evolution, but like, look, this is still about software process. So it's an agile software development methodology. It's not like a management methodology. So because of that disappointment that some of us had, there was a counter movement. And it's important to understand where we were in history, because the craftsmanship movement, when it was created in 2008 in Chicago, it was a counter movement, the same way that agile was a counter movement to the waterfall. So, and when you have a counter movement, you need to come strong. You cannot come soft, because otherwise you don't move the needle, right? So the needle was way too far in the process. We had to move that back. So craftsmanship, if you take like the initial talks of craftsmanship from Uncle Bob, or even mine talks, they were aggressive. They were more punchy and criticizing agile and scrum masters and everyone else, because it was a counter movement. So the craftsmanship was a way to try to restore that balance, to bring the technical practices. But another thing that is important to say, and that gets to the methodology versus ideology discussion, craftsmanship is not extreme programming. They are not the same thing. Extreme programming is a methodology that already existed, has 13 practices, while pair programming, TDD, and simple design, and refactoring, all of that stuff is already part of TDD. So craftsmanship brought a new mindset, a new ideology for developers, the way that we look at our profession, the focus on excellence and getting better. But of course, that one thing is you have that mindset. Yes, I want to be better. I want to be more professional or whatever. But what are the things that we actually do? And that's why there was a very strong association between craftsmanship as an ideology, as a mindset, with a technical methodology like extreme programming. So that was the origin, the beginnings of the craftsmanship. And then we put a lot of effort so that craftsmanship remained a software developer movement. And over the years, as we moved the needle a bit, and I think that craftsmanship did far more for extreme programming than the actual extreme programming community. Right? Because we were, it was no one was talking much about XP anymore. We pushed that back, right? So for me, like when you talk about with companies and stuff, what software craftsmanship, over the years, that friction that we created, because we did, Uncle Bob did that, I did that to a certain extent, and a few others did that, but that was just to move the needle. But now, craftsmanship, agile, lean, DevOps come later. All of those things, they play really well with each other. So we are not saying agile is bad. On the contrary, if we just treat agile for the process side, it's a perfect combination with craftsmanship. But that was the original idea at the same time, right? But that's the thing. So there was an ideology, an excitement that we brought back to all the developers, combined with some technical practices, right? So that was the origins of craftsmanship. And then we talked, and now everyone is friends, and we can coexist, and everyone has its place. But talking to companies like software craftsmanship, there is a mindset. But if you want to talk to managers, it's about excellence in software development. You can tackle from that perspective to be easier.
So when we talk about this management part, in your case, for example, regarding your CEO experience, what will be your recommendations in terms of organization? Because we can talk to managers, and usually they ask for numbers, and eventually they think about organization. How do we split people? How we do that, or how do we organize people? I don't know. It depends. From your experience, how do you think what would be the best way to do that?
Sorry, the question was to me or to Johan?
To you. To me.
So yes. I think that this is a mistake that we've made a lot in the craftsmanship world, and we still keep making a similar mistake.
Okay.
You don't go, if I had a penny for every time that someone asked me, how do I convince my team to do TDD or my manager to do TDD, I would be a millionaire right now, right? So this is the wrong question.
Okay.
And so where we failed was that as we got very attached to our practices, we start pushing them everywhere. But we, for example, if you go to the managers and say, hey, we need to do a TDD, you are going with a solution, right? You are going with a solution because TDD, pair programming, so extreme programming, Scrum, all of those things, they are a means to an end, but they are not the end themselves.
Yes, indeed.
And this is what we normally don't do well. We normally say, hey, we need to migrate the monolith to microservices. We need to do TDD. We need to have these and stuff. And we're always going with solutions that most people in the business side don't understand what problem we are trying to solve. So if we want to talk to them, we need to raise the conversation to their level. So first of all, agree with them. So this is like after working for consultancies for so many years, like decades now, this is a thing that we learned very quickly. If I want to drive change, I need to talk about which problems you are trying to solve and not how you're going to solve. So speak to them and say, look, how do you perceive the inefficiencies in our process? Do you perceive any inefficiencies in our process? Is there anything that you would wish that were better? So if you start there, then they will start saying, okay, well, we don't release very often, or testing is a pain, or when we release things, there's always bugs that we find later in the process.
Yeah.
Now we are talking about problems. And if they see that you can relate to those problems, you go from a confrontational conversation to a joint conversation. So, okay, yes, I agree with you. We don't deliver very often. We have loads of bugs, that we have an inefficient process because we discover problems too late in the process. What if we could do that, solve some of those things before shifting left, as we call? So you start this kind of, so you now are having a collaborative conversation about problems and stuff, and you are still not talking about solutions.
Yeah.
Once you are aligned, what are the possible solutions we could have? Oh, maybe if you could automate our tests. Automate when? Afterwards or before? Well, if we try to do before, it might save some time because then we avoid finding problems. So see what I'm saying? So you bring from their perspective, from the efficiencies, from the money saving, from time saving, and not we need to do TDD, because that's a losing battle.
Yeah, I noticed that very often when developers are coming, just like you said, is absolute. I totally agree on that, and I noticed the same behavior, let's call it, or the same phenomenon, but I never thought about it in depth. And it's true. Usually developers are solution oriented. They see a problem, they usually find solutions. So they bring solutions on the table right away. And the question that I very often hear is, wait, but what is the objective? What is the problem you are trying to solve? This is the question that I hear very often when somebody speaks with a solution. Yeah, absolutely. And
the funny thing, like just another thing, imagine like we ourselves as developers in a team, and then there is another guy from the team or another person from the team and say, hey, we should use this framework.
Yes.
How many times we had this discussion among developers when
God.
Someone says, we should use this framework, we should do this kind of design or this architecture. And then you start that fight because, again, we are proposing solutions.
Yeah.
Right.
I saw it. Yes, very often. Yes. When we talk about this collaboration between people and between teams, how, from your experience or from experience that you heard, maybe, how do you make collaborative decisions? How do you smooth the collaborative decisions? Because this is like not a bottleneck, but something like a rocky plain ground and you walk barefoot. So how do you use this part?
I wish I had a very simple answer to this question as well. So just for the people that joined this call, by the way, they didn't share with me any of the questions that they would ask me. So they want to put me on spot, just so everyone knows. So I spent, like, for example, I spent my last few years, most of my career was inside consultancies, and my company is a consultancy. So why is this relevant to your question? Because throughout my career, I was used to assemble teams, go to a project, disassemble the teams, go to another project. So we are constantly assembling and disassembling teams and changing. This is relevant for the question because it's much easier to have collaborative decisions when everyone has the same foundation. So let's say if we are all part of the software craftsmanship community, very rarely we would disagree that we need to test drive our code, because we have a similar foundation.
Yeah.
Right. So when you have people with the common foundation and a common set of values, collaborative decision makes it much easier, because there's not a lot fundamental disagreements. There are disagreements, but not in fundamental things. Indeed. On minor things we have disagreements. Yeah. But when you have a team that has a very different foundation or set of values, the collaborative decision making becomes very difficult. And this is the same, like, not only in a software team, but in society in general. It's exactly the same thing. It's any group of people, right? So one thing that you can work on in order to enable a better collaborative decision making is to provide that foundation. If people don't have that foundation when they join the company needs to make some effort to provide that foundation. How you do that? Through communities of practices, through internal trainings, external trainings, but you need to provide that foundation. And I also changed, as I see more and more these different teams and different contexts, I still feel that, and I didn't think that I would be saying that right now in my career, but I see that is important to have a good definition of roles and responsibilities. Because, like, what I see a lot is when everyone owns everything, no one owns anything. So collaborative decision making is good to a certain degree, but you still need a well-defined set of roles and responsibilities. Someone needs to say, guys, if you're not reaching an agreement here, you know what, that will be the decision. We are going to move forward like that. And in 2 weeks' time or in a month's time, we are going to revisit this together. But you need someone to provide that direction and stuff, and to kill those decisions, because otherwise some teams don't move, basically.
Yeah. So speaking about teams and responsibility and stuff, we can think as well about autonomy and autonomy of a team. So what's your point of view regarding the autonomy of a team? How autonomous a team can be?
So this is a thing that we've been discussing a lot very recently as well. So I think that there are, you know, like in software, that you have levels of abstraction. For example, you can talk about enterprise architecture. You have hundreds of different systems talking to each other.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you might have like a group of systems that are responsible for a specific thing. And then each one of those systems have their own responsibility. And then inside those systems, you have components and then classes and packages. So imagine this kind of level of organization, let's say, from software. Imagine the same thing for organizations and projects, right? So why this is important? Because those are different boundaries and different levels of abstraction where you can have autonomy. So for example, we have projects where we have 4 different teams in the same client. And those are enterprise clients. So for example, when we talk about the autonomy of the team, we need to define the boundary for that autonomy. You cannot have a developer that wants to run a multinational company.
Yes, and that's a problem, because quite often the developers have this tendency to go out, to cross those boundaries and go out of the context of their context.
So then when you talk about autonomy, we need to talk about boundaries for the autonomy. But another thing that is extremely important is accountability. because we don't talk about that. So a lot of people say, I want to be autonomous, I want to make decisions. Yes, but like, are you going to be accountable for your decisions? So then we had to define boundaries. For example, a very concrete example, at a team level, let's say a team member. At a team level and a team member, they should have the autonomy to decide who is going to do what, instead of being told who does what. So they should have agreed together for the goals of the sprint, let's say if they're working on a Scrum way. So, but that direction, for example, for what needs to be done on the following sprints, the teams don't have autonomy necessarily. That needs to come from the business to the agreement of who is paying for the process, because that's the service that you're providing. So you don't have, you can influence, you can provide ideas and say, look, if you do this way, we might have inefficiencies, or that would be better to do in a different way, but you don't have the autonomy to change that decision yourself as a team member. But you should have autonomy to decide who is going to do the work, how long it's going to take, so that you should have that autonomy and provide that information upwards. But another thing that the guys were saying, but should we have autonomy in how we design our code? It depends. It depends of the context that you are in. So if you are working a very large monolith and you are trying to standardize things across everything, you cannot have every team or every team member choosing whichever framework they want to use or design the system the way they want to. If you want a more microservices approach where this set of services is part of this department, this set of services is part of that department, you have plenty of freedom to change your technologies and stuff without impacting anyone else. So this is what I'm saying. So for example, there are levels of autonomy, and that level, those boundaries of autonomies, they also change. They either expand or collapse given the context that that team is in.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yes. Absolutely. One of the things is just a quick question, Valerio, and
yes, please.
For this, for the part with design and the software, because there should be something that like this is our main idea on how we design at the company level, solution level, and this is the software that we have to implement. And because the design will be like the contract, here is where we go, and here is how we go. So when we speak about the alignment between the design, the product design, and the software, what will be the ways to improve this part? Because they should go hand in hand. Otherwise, the implementation will deviate, and you'll as they say, the real documentation is in the source code. So how we can improve this alignment between this product design and the software?
Yeah, I have a full talk that I talk about aligning product and software design. And as I was saying, like there are different types of technical decisions that we make, right? So in one very small level is how much behavior do we want in a method, or how much behavior we want in a class or function and stuff like that. So this is very low level. This you can do whatever, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The impact is very small,
yeah.
Right? But if you're going to use cloud native on AWS, is a very different kind of decision, right? So you have from the full enterprise architecture all the way down to classes. So that alignment needs to take that into account. So for example, in order for you to design at the higher levels, at the enterprise architecture, technical architecture, all these more architectural decisions, even in terms of deciding what kind of behaviors your service or your system should provide to the other systems or to the external world. So this level of decision, you need to understand the business very well. You need to understand where the business is going, where we are now, what is the plan for the business for the next 6, 12 months, or even further, right? And then also, do we have a technical view, technology vision as well? So do we want to align our organization to a certain technology stack? Because of cost or strategy or whatever. So you need to take, because this is also a business decision. So understanding that having this vision for the future is very important for you to make those decisions, because those decisions, once you make them, it will be very difficult to change if you, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
So you need to make them, as the business is defining their goals for the next quarters or the next year or two, this is the right time for you to start talking about high-level architecture.
Yeah.
Not when you are iterating, not when you are trying to do, you cannot squeeze those kind of decisions in the middle of your sprint.
Yeah. That's dangerous. That's highly dangerous to me.
So how do we
honestly.
deal with that? We split our work into phases. So we try to align, let's say the business normally has a portfolio. They say like, we want to achieve this for Q1 or Q2 or so on and so forth. They have an idea. When we are having those discussions, we can break into phases and say, okay, we are going to work in this chunk of work for the next 6 months. So we are going to start that piece of work with an inception phase. So we're going to set aside 1, 2 sprints, whatever we need, to come up with a vision, for a technical vision for the problems that you want to solve. And in there, that's when you make our architectural decisions and stuff and align everything. And then we start iterating to build. But normally, like if you do some upfront thinking at architecture level, I find that it's better than do just in time. For the low level design, for the low level class, package, blah, blah, it's just in time. As I'm building, we are making those decisions. But architecture, you need to do a few workshops, understanding cost and blah, blah, blah. And those decisions are made up front and we review every 6 months. For example, you can have phases, right? So define, build, then, okay, where are we as a business? Where are you as technology? What we're going to do for the next 6 months? Let's have another review of our business and the current architecture that we have. Another inception, start iterating again. That's how we try to do it.
Cool, thank you. Valerio, you had a question.
Yes, I have a question related to what you said before, Sandro, about the autonomous and the boundaries of a team. For example, taking the sample you said about if there is a team that is working on a monolith application, and so in this case, it's for you enough the code review to check that each developer is respecting the framework choose, or it's not enough, and what else we can do?
So the context that you gave me was a monolith, where you have multiple teams working on the same code.
Let's put the same team, but could be a big team, like 10 developers. And for example, put the case that these developers work on also in other projects. So a developer that is not familiar with this project, at a certain point has to do a task in this other project. So this developer doesn't know the framework, let's say the convention that are used. So in this case, it's enough the code review, or
no. So this is why context is very important, because my answer will change depending on what kind of context you give to me. So in the context that you mentioned, I'm having people that are not familiar with the code base. They don't own the code base.
Yeah.
I find the code review to discuss those things way too late. What I would do is, if we bring them in to do some work, I would have a design session first. First of all, because they need to know what they need to build. Let's say a few developers come in and they will need to build a feature into this monolith. The monolith should have someone, either a person, a small group of people, or even a full team that owns the technical strategy of that monolith. So as soon as you bring someone in to do some work in there, you need to discuss what needs to be done, but I would discuss also how it will be done. I would have like a session on the whiteboard with boxes and arrows, or a shared whiteboard online now, and also discuss which technologies can be used, what cannot be used, and create those boundaries, create the high-level design and stuff. So for me, the code review should be a tick box. I should not get any surprise in a code review. If I find is a minor thing here and there, but if we are finding big things in code reviews, is the same problem of having tests towards the end of the process. It's way too late to discuss it because now it's done. If you want to change that, you need to throw that thing away. So those important decisions, shift left, bring to the front.
Okay.
And have that agreement. And the code review is just a tick box.
Okay. Thank you. I have another technical question for you, and it's about the outside-in TDD. Because I've read that this methodology is criticized for making a fragile test. So I want to ask you if you agree with that, and if you agree, what is your strategy to fight these fragile tests?
So this is a very difficult question, because talking on the abstract makes it very difficult, because people have different experiences. Some of you might know, like Uncle Bob and I, we recorded 14 hours of video doing a like-for-like comparison, right? Because it's so difficult to talk on the abstract, and people will say, oh, the tests are fragile, or these or that. And people that prefer outside in, or people that prefer class assist, each one will start talking on the abstract and all the problems that they had. People will have problems with, regardless of what they do, they will have problems if they don't know very well what they are doing, right? So, and people will have preference. So that's why we had to create a really like-for-like comparison. And for some, if some of you watch it, you will see that the approach to build exactly the same functionality is completely different. The way you go about it, the end result is similar, but the approach is very different. So I was saying all of that because I personally, when you choose an approach, it will have pros and cons. And then you need to decide if you can live with those pros and cons, right? So I would never say to you that outside in is perfect and is the best one and stuff, because I'll be lying. The same way that I think classicist has also a lot of problems. I normally, given the type of work that I do, I normally prefer outside in. But for example, I understand that my tests are coupled to my implementation, but it's important to decide where it's coupled. Because, for example, when you are the outside in, the classes that are at the very entry point of your application, the way I try to describe this, the classes that are at the beginning of your application, your endpoint or your application service or domain service, if you like domain-driven design as well. So those classes, their responsibility is to control a flow, right? So you will not have a massive class at the very top of your application, because otherwise it will be very procedural. So those classes, their responsibility is to talk to the different steps of the flow. Let's say your endpoint or controller is coordinating the flow. So a class that coordinates a flow should never do any work except coordinating flows. So of course my test needs to be coupled to that, because that is the behavior of the class, is coordinating the flow. So if I add steps to the flow, remove steps to the flow, or how certain steps of the flow change, of course my test should break. And I don't have any problems with that, in having that coupled, right? I would have a problem if it was coupled to very low-level details in how I parse an XML, in how I do certain calculations. Then I would have an issue. But if I'm testing flow control, of course that my test will break if the flow changes. So that is one. But as you go inside, and the classes are becoming very specific, and you call a method, and that method will do a lot of calculations or transformations and stuff, my test will have zero knowledge of how things are done, right? So, but I like, another thing that is a common mistake in the outside in is to think that mock is a testing tool. As I always say, mock for me is a design tool, because as I was coming from outside, as soon as I say I get to my endpoint or my application service, let's say, I say, okay, so now this class here will create a flow. then I will be thinking, I'll be designing, what are all the different steps of my flow? How much behavior I will have in each step? What would, if I go to step 1 and step 1 returns something to me, do I go to step 2 or go to step 3? So this is for me, I'm designing. So my mocks are there to design that interface of the next set of collaborators. So I use that to design that collaboration. So the end result, so the good thing is that I'm designing at the high level, I'm only building what I need, but there is a side effect that your tests will be coupled to that implementation. There's no doubt about it. But given the pros and cons and the style that I like to code, I don't have an issue as long as the coupling is only on the coordination of collaborators, but not the actual work that the collaboration does on its own.
Okay. Yes, yes, I think it's clear. Yes, and I already heard some other talks from you that you said that you normally you switch between the two methodologies. So outside in and classicist depends on what are you doing.
Yeah, and just another, for example, a lot of people, for example, things on the classicist, yes, the tests are less coupled to the implementation. This is true, but normally you tend to violate encapsulation because you need to expose the state to make to your test, and quite often you need to create a hole in your system so that you can go there and try to get to that state that you need, or expose things that you shouldn't be exposing so you can test. Again, is this a good or a bad thing? It depends. If you value more the decoupling of the test over that flaw in the design, it's fine. This is why it's so difficult. It becomes a preference as well.
Okay.
Right?
We talked about quite a lot of technical stuff and about craftsmanship things, and a lot of things that we said, you mostly said, can be found as principles in Software Craftsmanship Manifesto that has been created in 2009. What has changed since this manifesto, apart from the pandemic? And the fact that Java now comes each 6 months, a new version of Java.
that's a finally, like
finally, yes.
So I think that the collaboration is still not there. I think that we still didn't learn how to communicate with the business. I think that we are still very attached to technical practices. I feel that, oh yes, I know what is, I don't know, another way to answer your question, I can tell you what frustrates me the most, or frustrated me the most with the craftsmanship movement.
Okay.
Right, so one thing that I noticed inside the craftsmanship community is that as we push the needle a lot to the quality and the obsession with excellence, I saw a lot of prima donnas emerge from the craftsmanship community. Developers that think that now they are the center of the world and everyone should listen to their genius brain and stuff. And fuck the business, fuck everything. Like, you know, I will take the time that it takes me. Right. So don't push me. I'm not going to give you estimates. I'm the prima donna here. You keep just paying me every month. Don't forget that. It's very important. Pay me every month, but I'll be done when I'm done. And this pisses me off.
Yes. That's a problem. That's a huge problem.
And then they have their own sense of excellence. And they spend there are pairing sessions that I want to bang my head against the wall. Because the person will spend 5 hours trying to rename a variable, right? And those things really piss me off, right? So, and then when you have those conversations, then people say, but we should have excellence everywhere. So I realized that we were not very clear, and there's no guidelines because the problem that we have here is it's not that they are prima donnas just for the sake of it. They are trying to do a good job. We created the monster, right? So that's the truth. We created this monster in the craftsmanship world. So people are trying to do an excellent job. So now they have, oh, we should learn. I talk about that in my book. Bob talks about this in the book. We should learn how to say no. Right? We talk about both books. So, and now everyone is no, I'll do what I want. So, because they want to do a good job, they want to do excellent. So how do we counter that? Very recently, I've been thinking a lot about this, and if we think about the professionalism side of the manifesto, at the end of the day, being a professional means that you are paid for the service that you offer. That's what a professional does. You are paid for the service, right?
Yeah.
In that context, you as a professional, you should know all the best techniques, all the good practice and stuff. You should know that. But then there is the service that you offer. And in the service that you offer, you need to understand what are the constraints. And there are real constraints and there are made up constraints. The made up constraints, you should fight them. You should try to remove them. But there are real constraints. And sometimes time and money are constraints, or technology stack, or team structure, or whatever. Sometimes those things are constraints, right? Real constraints. So then, how do you balance the pragmatism, which people mistaken for cutting corners, and excellence? So the way that we're talking about that inside Codurance nowadays is like, we should always, so excellence cannot be unbounded. Because when excellence is unbounded, there's no boundaries to excellence. You don't produce anything. You keep renaming a variable for 5 hours. So how do we constrain? So you create a pragmatic solution given the constraints that you have. So, okay, given the constraints I have, what is the best solution I can come up with, respecting those constraints? And that decision becomes the pragmatic solution and becomes the boundaries for excellence. So say, I will have excellence within the bounds of the solution that we agreed on. And this is for monoliths, for example. Sometimes you are working in one area. We might do a minor tweaks here and there, but you need to bound that work. Say, look, this is my focus. Yes, I might touch, but I cannot apply the Boy Scout rule across everything I touch. I need to have a limit, because I started here, I touched this area, but once I touch this area, I might touch that area. And all of a sudden, I think I should take 2 days. Now it's 3 months and you are still refactoring.
Yeah.
So this is what we're trying to do going back is, what for me changed needs to change is that we become more focused on providing a professional service. And that means understanding the constraints, being pragmatic, define a pragmatic solution, and having excellence within the pragmatic solution, and not having unbounded excellence. That's what I've been talking about more recently.
Do you think a version 2 of Software Manifesto, a version 2021 version of Software Manifesto will be needed to, for example, to speak about that? Maybe remove some things, some existing things, or adapt them, the existing things, but create a V2 of the manifesto.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that actually, of a new version. I don't even know how many people really pay attention to those manifestos as well. So I don't know. This is a thing to consider. I have not considered that, and I think that just the manifesto itself is not enough. The Agile manifesto has the values and stuff, but they have another 12 principles, and I think that those 12 complementing the manifesto, maybe with a few guiding principles, could be a good idea as well.
Yeah.
Yes, I have another question related to what you said before. So about this, let's say what you do like most, this monster created by the craftsmanship. So in other words, it's right to say that we have to make a compromise between the quality and the time or money constraint. So is what you said is this in other words?
So, almost, because if you think like that, we will end up having a false dichotomy. right? So
Mm-hmm.
we have a false dichotomy that we are compromising quality because of something else. And this is exactly what led to the problems that I was describing before. A different way of thinking about the same thing is like, what are my real constraints?
Mm-hmm.
And given the real constraints I have, what is the best approach or solution we can give? Because if you phrase that like that,
Mm-hmm.
you will never be compromising, because you accept the constraints as real constraints. So there's no compromise. They are just constraints.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And another question is, let's say, related to this, that because in your book, The Software Craftsman, you say that the software craftsman must be, so it's not about elitism. So, and for example, this kind of monster that you said, the prima donna is, let's say, feels a little bit elitary. So for you, what is the best way to fight this? Let's say if it's right to fight or to avoid or to not have it.
Well, I'm a bit skeptical. So every time we talk about human behavior, there's no way you can constrain. You see our society nowadays. It doesn't matter which kind of political leaning people have. Some of them will behave very well. Some of them will not behave well. So the only thing that I can think of is having more of those conversations. But the conversation needs to be more like, again, remember that when we had a counter movement, we had to come stronger. So even words that I used, Bob used, JB used, a few other guys used, they were stronger because it was a counter movement, but we had to soften. Because if you just go to people, for example, as it was said in the past, if you don't do TDD, you are not professional. Or if you don't do this, you are that. And if you start calling people names because they don't behave in the way that you think they should behave, that's a losing battle. The only thing that you're going to create is more animosity, is more conflict. So I think that in order to avoid that, is to having conversations like that. And you might want to talk about how you behave, how your team is behaving, but avoiding judgments on the other. I know that I mentioned the prima donnas before, but like what I think is just, yes, I don't behave like that. I don't like that at all, right? I think that it's not a behavior that I would have in my company or in my teams. But I will not be calling everyone. For example, one thing is to talk about in a general terms. Oh, some people might behave like a prima donnas. Another thing is like, if you disagree, let's say, Valerio, we have an exchange and I feel that we disagree and you think that you should do something, I go on and start calling you prima donna. That is a personal attack that you never allow that the two of us reach an agreement.
Okay. And I have another question that we talked already a bit at the start, but maybe I could be a little bit of repeat is good for the people that connected later. That in your book you say that the agile methodologies allows to do the thing right, and the software craftsmanship, oh sorry, the right thing, and the software craftsmanship, the thing right. I want to ask you if you could do a concrete example of this.
Well, so the process, like for example, if you take the process side, let's use Scrum as an example, or normal agile processes. Doing the right thing means looking at the business. What are our business needs? What we need to do moving forward? What is the priorities? And that is doing the right thing. And being able to inspect often, right? So every 2 weeks, every whatever period of time, depending on which level that you are inspecting. If you are inspecting at the low levels, you inspect very often. If you're inspecting the higher levels, you inspect less often. So, and that is doing the right thing, is calibrating what your business, what you'll be doing moving forward and adapting to your needs. That is the right thing. And then there is the thing right, is this goes back to Rodslav question. How do you align the technical strategy to support the business needs. So this is making sure that we have the right strategy that will create the right foundation so that we can change as we go along. So it's difficult to be very specific, but I can tell you how in different contexts, how the architecture would change. For example, in the same talk that I talk about aligning product and software design, you might be in a context like I am, where the client has B2B, so business to business needs. The market is very well defined. The set of features is very well defined. They speak to their customers to know what they need. So for example, I'm in a business-wise, very stable scenario. Every feature that we have, I know that this is what our clients will want. So I can align my technology to be stable from the get-go, from the beginning. This is what we are releasing. This is the number of clients. This is the expected load that we're going to have and stuff. I can be very precise and come up with a production-ready solution to support that kind of environment. But I might be in a completely different environment, and we had clients like that are in that kind of the crazy lean startup approach. They're still trying to figure out what the market needs, and it's a B2C. So they're constantly push this feature, let's measure and blah, blah, and then change and change and change and change. So you don't have stability in the business requirements, which is okay for that kind of business and where they are in that journey. That's the right thing for them to experiment. So then your technical solution will be completely different because you need to architect your system in a way that supports that constant change. So this is different examples of you aligning your technical strategy according to the business strategy.
We have a quick question in the chat from Guillaume. He's asking, we talked earlier about the communication with the business is often a pain point, and we spoke about the solution before thinking about problems. So the question is, how do you propose a solution before the problem actually happens, when you know it's going to happen? Basically, you see as a developer or an architect or a technical person that you go into a wall and you want to avoid this wall, but you know there will be a problem, that's a certain problem. So how do you introduce the problem which does not exist yet in order to provide the solution and maybe change the course of the implementation of the solution in the business?
This is another one that is a bit difficult because of context can change everything. So
yeah.
But one way that we normally would do in any kind of relationship, and that's not only about software teams or even our personal, if I will do something that I know that someone's going to be annoyed, I have many things that I can do. I can just do it and face the problem, or I can say, you know what, I'm going to have a chat with this person.
Honey, we need to talk.
So we say, go to this person and say, look, I know that you care about these kind of things. We now need to do these kind of things. And given my knowledge of your need, the things that you are concerned about, and my knowledge of what I need to do, I can foresee that we might have a conflict in here. So I would like to have a chat with you so that before we go too far in creating that, is there a middle ground here? Is there a way for us to work, where I can address some of your concerns, but still not compromise the work that I need to do? And also, for example, those two people, are they fully empowered to make the decision themselves? Or they need to escalate, but escalate in a positive way, not like, oh, I'm going to speak to your boss, right? So it's saying, look, I know, for example, I'm getting pressure from my boss to do this, right? And this is the scope that I can, there are things that I can change myself, but depending on the conversation that I have, I might need to escalate from my side. So understanding that and bringing the right people to the first meeting or the follow-up meetings is also important. But you do that in a collaborative, you acknowledge, right? So if you know that there is a problem, means that you know that whatever you're going to do, someone is going to be upset. So start the conversation already acknowledging that. Yes, I know that this is important for you. And this is why I'm here. right? So if you do that, you probably will start the meeting.
That's a very interesting approach. Yeah. You bring it with the value. You bring it with you bring the interest first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is true for every human interaction, right? So I need to acknowledge your feelings. I cannot just doesn't mean that I'm going to do everything you want.
Yeah.
But you need to be clear that I understand that you are feeling a certain way or will feel in a certain way. And that's why we're here to resolve.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Thanks for the answer. Valerio, you...
Yes, I have another question that they say that this was not prepared, but came in my mind where we were speaking that I watched an interview of Kent Beck, and where he says that the extreme programming was not so spread as the Scrum, for example, because there was no, let's say, certification like Scrum Master, etc. So for you, this could make sense for the software craftsmanship to have to create something like this, certification of a software craftsman to, in the sense, not in the business point of view, but just to allow to spread this movement.
I was asked this question a few times. I even had invitations from different people to define those certifications and stuff, and I rejected them all. I think that it would be a mistake. I think that if you do that, my biggest fear would be to transform software craftsmanship in a cult, or a thing that people just do and they pass a test, and now they become a craftsperson. So I would be against that, because this is for me the difference of a mindset, an ideology from a methodology. If you have a methodology or a technology, yes, maybe if you go through some highly specified, highly focused training, and you do some tests or whatever, yes, it might attest that you know that methodology or that technology well, or at least to a decent degree. You understand the technology. But when you talk about mindset, and because I keep seeing software craftsmanship as a mindset, is a behavioral approach, is the way I see the world, is my relationship between me and my profession, right? I think that would be very difficult. First, I would be against, and one of the reasons is I don't think it's the right thing to do, and it would be almost impossible to do that properly.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I understand it.
Yeah. We have another question in the chat from Usama. He's asking, this is a more practical question, one that it happens to me quite often. If the business always choose the lower cost solution, when you say your task will be done in 2-3 days, obviously the business will learn that it's 2 days. So if the business always choose the lower cost solution, do you think I should not propose to the business a lower cost solution in the future? So basically you come up with 2-3 solutions and you organize them by cost, and then you just track through the first ones and you bring only the one that you think is most effective, and you just say that's the solution.
This is a very complicated question. It's far more complicated than it looks. I know I'm a consultant. I need to say it depends, right? So
they have no answer.
so there are boundaries. There are things that you know that you should not do. There are things that you should know that you cannot deliver something that is not tested, right? So there are things that you know that you cannot shrink. But in theory, in the craftsmanship world, for the small decisions that we make,
I found this.
My Siri wants to speak to me. Don't provide options that you don't agree with the first time, for the first place. So there's no point in you providing an option that, in your view and your team's view, is not a viable option. So if that is the case, don't provide it. Provide what is viable, right? But this is where this gets more complicated, because it's not as simple like that. What you cannot do either is to say, oh, the only option is because I want to use lambdas in AWS and I want to use TypeScript and I want to use this and that, and all of a sudden you came up with an idea that's going to take 6 months, when clearly this is a thing that you are imposing on the business, and that's not the best thing to the business. So there are limits to that thing. So certain decisions are business related, and the business might, if you give something to the business that is not acceptable business wise, what they will do, they will impose the deadline. They say, look, I need this by done. Then the discussion becomes different. Okay, so if you are going to set the date, we can discuss what can be done into the date. But like, this is what, this goes back to what I was saying about the real constraints, pragmatic solution, and make sure that excellence exists within the boundaries of that solution. So it is a complex, but never propose, oh, I can do that faster if I drop the unit tests. That is not an option, right? So just don't do it, because that doesn't make sense. Again, also remember, like, a thing that is going to take, the difference is 1 day or 2 in a long project makes zero difference, right? So don't provide an option that you cut the unit test because you can save a day out of 3 in a project that goes on forever, right?
Yeah.
So calibrate those decisions, right?
Thank you. Question, Valerio, do you have a different question, or?
No, for me it's okay. Thanks a lot.
As a closing point, Sandro, we would like to know, we asked quite lots of questions, and we had the questions in chat. Would you like us to ask a question that we didn't ask? Is there something that you would have liked to talk about, but we haven't asked for it?
Ooh, I'm not sure. We covered such a diverse set of topics, right? Yeah. So I'm not sure. There's nothing that is coming to mind. The things that I felt that were important to mention, we talked about. No, nothing that is jumping from my mind. I think we covered a lot of very cool topics.
Ah, cool. Then that means the questions were pretty pertinent to the to the essential idea. So
I think so.
Glad to hear that. Thanks a lot.
Yes.
And we have in the chat for every participant in the room, if before leaving, please take a moment and give us a little feedback. There is a link that you can access and give us a little feedback that can help. And thanks a lot, Sandro, for amazing. For me, it was just incredible. I really loved the time.
Same for me.
Yeah. So
I think I will watch again this the registration of this the recording of this video.
Yeah, it's a lot of wisdom in this recording, and thanks for sharing it with us. Thanks for being here with us. We need support for personalities like you in our humble community that we are trying to push forward. And yeah, thanks a lot. And I don't know. Have a good day to everyone.
And, my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure for me to be speaking to you.
And sorry, I just have a really quick question. Last time we've seen each other, Sandro, it was 2 years ago now, and you were talking about writing a book regarding aligning software and product design. Where are you now?
So you wouldn't believe that I have about 150 pages written that I'm almost throwing away. Like the last year was very challenging for us, and my focus changed a lot, and I'm not just having the time. So I might go back to that, but I stopped writing almost a year ago, but I already had 150 pages written at that point. But the problem is that when you stop and you do a lot of things, when we look back, you already changed your mind.
Yeah.
Right. So, and a lot of things that I've been focusing on, although the aligning product and software design is very close to my heart, most of my year and a half yeah, for the last year and a half, most of my time has been spent on software modernization projects. And that's what I've been talking a lot recently with videos and stuff. So I'm far more focused on software modernization on the other hand. So I need just to, So the answer to you, I don't have a proper answer, but I had to park for a bit. If I go back, I'm not sure if writing the book would be the right thing to do, or if having more, I was thinking about having a series of videos instead, because it's much easier, it's faster. I can just sit down, talk, and maybe I can convey the same ideas in a more digestible format that could be produced quicker. So I'm still thinking about it.
Okay. Okay, I loved your video, your talk at. I don't remember the event, but it was really amazing about this topic. So I really invite you to watch it. Yeah.
We said earlier about this, the fact that we cannot, you don't see it well to have a certification, whatever title. You know, from other side, we speak quite a lot about balancing the force and do excellence and stuff, which really comes close to the JDI. So maybe you can have a order of craftsmanship and have JDIs who are humble and nice and voilà.
We can think there was like a long time ago, there was a conversation that was many years ago in the early days of the craftsmanship community, a global network of mentors and mentees, so to speak. But it was difficult to organize, but yes.
And you see, it's long time ago. Yes, it's all about JDI and the order. So that was the geek, I know, but okay. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks again, Sandro.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation.
Thanks, Sandro. Thanks, Valerio. Thanks, Juan, Adrian, Alex. Everyone, thanks for the participants. Have a good day and peace.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.